So eBay is a consumer company, and the term product-led growth actually is sort of like attached more to B2B companies. But I think of the constructs or the actual frameworks are the same. And at eBay, the way we think about it is like, if you look at the stakeholders, we have the product organization, which includes the design team, the engineering team, the research team, analytics, all of that. But then we have stakeholders on the business side, right? And they are the people who are in the markets, actually in the local markets. For example, we have our largest businesses are in Germany and and in UK, so we have people there as well. Product-led growth is super important because you have to sort of like understand the customer problems, right? Opposed to constantly working on features. And that is the balance that I think of in any organization that has to sort of manage it. And are you sort of basically grounding all of the work that you're doing to some problems and not just celebrating launching of features, right? And then when you solve these problems, are you measuring it in a sustainable way and only celebrating when these problems are actually solved? So that's how I think about product-led growth, and it's a cultural change that we are sort of driving, just not in eBay, but so many different organizations across the globe. Absolutely. So at any time, we're working across 10 to 12 different initiatives, right? These initiatives are usually laid out at the beginning of the year or at the half-yearly basis, right? So there are parts of the initiative that we control where the roadmap and the problems are defined by my teams. And then the other part of the work that we do is collaborating with cross-functional leaders on initiatives that they might be driving, right? So that's how my team is structured. We have one part of the team working with product managers across the organization, and the other part driving growth, driving overall improvements on the product within our sort of constraint. Great question, and I have sort of thought a lot about that as well. To me, there are a few things that are very important to me. One is being very clear on the strategy and vision of the product. So I think it is the leader's role to define that and communicate that and over-communicate that very clearly. That's one part. Second part is coaching your team, right? So making sure that they are getting opportunities to learn, but also giving them continuous feedback so that they learn the craft really well, right? And we've heard the term craft used a lot today in terms of product management. And then third is really empowering the teams to go and execute against the strategy, right? And this is where I feel I am most passionate about. My talk today was also around that topic. And I feel like that is really the thing that makes product managers, and not just product managers, the entire product organization happy. I tie it to what Daniel Pink says around giving autonomy, and that is what drives intrinsic motivation. This is just a different way to say it when you're looking at it through the product lens, which is empowering product teams. So those are the three pillars that I think are super important from a leader's perspective. I think the most important thing for me was to understand how to really write down strategy and communicate strategy. Right? I had a great boss who sort of like I saw on how he was doing it, and I learned from watching him. Strategy is very fuzzy, right? And yes, there are a lot of things written down about it, but I think you really have to do it by watching somebody do it well, and then be able to take that playbook or take that framework and then repeat it multiple times, right? So I found that the earlier that you can learn how to do strategy well will actually help you sort of like really take on more responsibility, grow faster in your career, and really earn the trust of your leadership team. I think it's super important, right? I mean, there is no other way to do this, right? And I talked about missionaries versus mercenaries, and unless you have the product team, the engineering team, the design team, all sort of in the same room, understanding the problems, figuring out what the hypotheses are and trying to define solutions. Unless you do that over and over again, we will have a team of mercenaries who will just not be tied to the problem and not develop the empathy. I think it's super important. There's no other way to do it. And again, it comes back to giving the teams autonomy. I think I talked about this today, which is basically the trust has to be built between the teams and the leaders, right? And the way you build trust is by bringing your stakeholders, and stakeholders could be sideways or up and down, along in the journey, right? And by that I mean that you take all of the right product management practices in place. You are talking to customers, you are looking at the data, you're running A/B tests, or be it, but constantly communicate and over-communicate and bring everybody along in that journey. So if you've just talked to customers and you've gotten some insights, spend the time to actually tell other people what you learned. If you run an A/B test and you learn something from the A/B test, tell other people, there's probably a different product team that could, benefit from your learnings, right? So figure out what works for you and what works for the stakeholders, but just around the communication and, and bringing everybody along the journey is super important. Yeah, it's very different, right, in each of these companies, I would say definitely. And also it really depends on the product that you're working on. So at Visa, I was working on a 0 to 1 product, right? And that team had a lot of autonomy, bought a lot of leeway, not too much revenue pressure to go and explore opportunities, right? And it was, in those environments, you don't, have impact on, in every 3 months or every 6 months. So you got to be okay with that, right? And and it's a slow environment. Visa was it's a behemoth, and it doesn't move as fast as Netflix when I looked at Netflix, right? So that's one thing. At Microsoft, it was a really large organization. I was doing business development there, and I felt that business development was so far removed from product, and I could not go and influence product so much, right? And it's very different environment, right? That's the largest company I think I've worked for ever. And it takes time. It takes a lot of time building relationships and trying to influence. And it could take a year, right? In a product like Bing that I worked on. Netflix was super fast. Netflix, I really enjoyed that experience, and things moved like at a really fast pace. What I mean by that is I remember one time that I was off email or something for 3 hours, and there was an issue. And we were able to sort of resolve that issue and move on. It took me just being 3 hours off the grid, resulted in missing out that whole action. But even outside that, right, it was a very customer centric organization, and the teams were very empowered to go and make very tough decisions around the product. eBay. I think eBay is somewhere in the middle between, I would say, Netflix and Visa. We are a organization that is pretty large, fairly large, but we're also very open to changing our culture, right? So I feel like there are a lot of microcultures within eBay, and if you have built a good culture, you can go in and sort of educate other teams about it, like what's working, what's not working, and there's a very open mindset to learn to do different things in a different way.